So I want to just kind of jump right in. So here's a few pictures of different Jews from African and Asian lands. Now, before we go into it, so I chose this topic because I didn't want it to just be Sephardic Jewry. First off, I'm going to say one reason why I'm talking about this, which I'm going to go into in a moment, but is that I feel like a lot of our Jewish experience, including myself, is kind of like Ashken normative, as they say, like Ashkenazic Jewry. I grew up in going to Salman Schechter Hebrew Day School, and I grew up in America with my mother's side, which is Ashkenaz, and my grandmother spoke Yiddish to me and everything like that. So I grew up in that. Now, every summer I visited Israel, and my grandparents were Sephardi from my father's side, Sephardic. So I didn't know that much about that community at all, aside from my visits to Israel. When I moved to Israel after high school, I was completely immersed in Israel obviously is like an amalgam of many different cultures. So I was exposed to many different types of cultures. It was all new to me and interesting. And I spent a lot of times among Ethiopian, Yemenite Jews in different seminaries I was in, and Sephardic. And so this is kind of like some of the results of my exploration, my reflections on the cultures. And also, as I was in Israel, I spent more time with my grandma and my grandpa, Saba and Safta. I got to know Sephardic culture from within. So I kind of have like the best of both worlds. Me personally, I take on some of the Sephardic customs that my father's from there, but I don't completely identify with either group completely, because I feel like there's a lot of good that each of my parents and their parents bequeathed to me. And so I like both of the cultures a lot. And so I'm just going to share with you the other side today. So let's go back to that, back to the screen. Okay, can you see that now, Hannah?
No.
No? What about now? Let me try again.
There we go. It says you started screen sharing.
Can you see now?
It said you started, but then you
so
jumped
maybe it's
out.
a little bit of a delay.
Yeah, so there it is. Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so here's the structure of our class this year. Our course, we're going to go through the bottom of the screen. You can see Sephardic Jewry, Ethiopian, Yemenite, and we're all going to do this in like 9 weeks. So you're just going to, through this mini course, each one of these topics can be a full year in university. So with this mini course, you're going to get a taste of the different cultures, some of the intriguing aspects of them, the customs, and then hopefully it'll spur push you to do a little bit more investigating on your own. So here's the topic we're going to be talking about right now is like an intro to our course. So here's just the geography where these different communities are from. So we have here's Mizrachi, Sephardic, Ashkenazic on the map. So we're going to talk a little bit in a moment about the difference between Mizrachi and Sephardi, which is like interesting. People don't often make that distinction. So that's kind of like the first group, which is Sephardic. Then we're going to deal with Ethiopian Jewry. And I have a buddy of mine. He's a rabbi and a doctor at Bar-Ilan University, and we used to like sit in the back of class cracking jokes when we were there. But now he's like an important figure. I hope I am too. I don't know. So he actually wrote a book of Jewish law for Jews of Ethiopia. So I spoke with him a lot about this, about the Ethiopian Jews and their struggles for acceptance in Israel and their law and their customs. So I have a lot to share with you on that. And then we have Yemenite Jews, which are a whole interesting world into themselves. And each one of these communities had their unique struggles. And we're going to talk about them throughout the year. Okay, so here's our schedule. Let me actually turn this into presentation mode. Here's our schedule. All right, so we're going to, we have 9 lectures in this program, and so we're going to talk about the yellow Sephardic, Ethiopian, Yemenite, and the Sephardic. The only reason why I didn't delineate the other 5 through 8 is because I still have to work out all the details for that. But I know that for Sephardic Jewry, we're going to go through their spirituality, culture. We're why we can't eat kitnios, or why Sephardim can. Depends who the we is. And we're going to go through. I'll talk about one of the main halachic authority in the Sephardic community today, who passed away recently, Rav Ovadia Yosef. Today it's his yahrzeit, so we're going to talk about him as well. Now, why this topic? Okay, so there's a few reasons why I chose this topic, and I shared a little bit with you before. I think it's important to have knowledge of all types of Judaism, not just the Judaism that we know about. So that's another thing. I think that through getting to know these other types of other forms of culture, it can add to offer you some. It can encourage you to have more love and appreciation for the other, and that's a really important thing. There's so much beauty out in the world of different flavors of Judaism, and if you get to know them, you can really appreciate them, and perhaps maybe take the good from each one. And I'll just share that I taught this class on some of the stuff on Shabbos, so that's kind of like my connection to it. And also, if you took a look at those pictures there, I'll go back to that in a moment, but we have, like I shared with you, I have a Sephardic connection in Israel, and I actually worked in a Sephardic synagogue before Beth Tfiloh. I don't know if you knew that, but I worked in a Syrian synagogue in New York. They had really good food there, but they also had a lot of other really cool things, but the food really stands out though. But so that was like an experience. So I've been kind of engaged and engrossed and meshed in some different ways in Sephardic culture. So that's kind of like this class comes from there. Let's go back to the shared screen now. All right, you'll let me know when it pops up. All right, put a thumbs up if you can see it. Can you see the screen? Cool. All right. Here's what we're going to focus on in each all together for the course. Again, I don't want to spend too much time in this course introduction. I actually want to teach today too, some material, but it's good to get the general idea of where we're going. So here's just a cool picture. Anyone know what this is? Let me just see if I can see you. Anybody know what this is? This is a henna. Yes, this is a modern henna, or like a modern pre-wedding, pre-wedding, getting the bride ready for a wedding. This is in the Yemenite culture, and we'll talk about that. Here's actually a Sephardic prayer book, which looks different than an Ashkenazic prayer book. We're going to talk about that as well. If you pay attention, there's a lot of like names of God in it. In the Modim, for instance, Modim Atau Hashem, they have all these letters: Yud, Aleph, Hey, Daled, Vav, Nun, Hey, Yud. And you have another letter. So we're going to talk about like all the letters and mysticism that's in Sephardic prayer books. It's just two examples, but we're going to talk about we're going to focus on 5 main things: the history and origins. So how did each group end up in their land? So it's like really interesting. Like, so where did the Ethiopian Jews come from? How did they get there? And are they bona fide halachic Jews? Or like the Yemenites, like when did they get to Yemen? You know, that kind of thing. We're going to talk about like how all their struggles to acceptance as well, like within the broader Jewish community. And throughout our learning, we're going to go through different figures. So Rav Ovadia Yosef, as I mentioned, different Yemenite rabbis, and Dr. Sharon Shalom, that rabbi I told you about. And I think it's going to be fun going through the cultures too. So we're going to talk about how the synagogues are laid out, which I think will be interesting. Some of their celebrations, how they dress, foods. A lot of times a lot of the cultures kind of dress similarly today, but that's how they always dress. So we're going to talk about that. This is actually it's probably the centerpiece of the course, is comparing the halacha. Okay, so each group has these ancient traditions, like the Yemenites, where they read the Torah in the way they probably read many, many years ago. If anybody's ever been in a Yemenite synagogue. Some of the Ethiopian customs are really interesting. Around Nida, for instance, some communities will actually send the women away to like a secluded area for a certain period of time, or they'll have women who do brit milahs. There's like different roles, or they'll bring certain sacrifices at different times. So there's different ancient traditions that are still retained in some of these communities, which are interesting. But most interesting thing I think will be to compare their halacha to Ashkenazic halacha and how it's different. And what I really want to focus on, though, is like also the process. Like, how did they get to establishing the halacha different in Sephardic communities than in Ashkenazi communities. And here's some of the customs we're going to focus on. We have temple mourning practices, meat and milk, glak kosher for Sephardim, the Sidurim, the Nida laws, slichot, kitniot. So we have a lot to go through. We're going to kind of go through it relatively quickly. We're going to cram a lot of information into this. And hopefully you'll find it enlightening and inspiring, and it'll excite you to want to visit these cultures again, maybe in person or do some research on your own. There's so much beauty out there, so many flavors of Judaism. A lot of times we don't get exposed to them. So I'm hoping to, you're going on some tours this year through Americas. I'm hoping to take you on a tour here as well and give you a taste of these different cultures. All right, so let's go back here. So without further ado, last thing, next semester. Okay, here's some things we're gonna do next semester. A whole different energy. Okay, so this is just me wanting to watch some movies together with you in the second semester. I don't know if anybody. I can see your pictures now. Give a thumbs up if you recognize some of these movies. Okay, so here's some movies I gave. So this is also based on a course I gave like 10 years ago at Gratz College for these seniors in Gratz College. I was trying to find ways to engage them. This is before I was a rabbi. And I would show them movies. I'd buy them popcorn and Chex Mix, and that would get them to come. I'd show them movies that I liked, and I analyzed them, and then it was called Video Values. That was the course. That's what I'm going to call it for us, too. Obviously, I'm going to up it to another level for us, but we kind of went through these different movies and talked about Jewish themes connected to the movies. So as you see, this is Bruce Almighty. I really like this movie. It talks a lot about providence. This is probably one of my favorite movies, Groundhog Day. If anybody has seen that before, there's some really funny scenes in that movie. But there's a big theme of tshuva there. So we're going to kind of talk about them, and perhaps if you want to offer your own film topic, and you think that, and you can explain why you think it might be worth us watching. We're not going to watch the whole thing, but I'll offer you, hopefully you can watch on your own, and we're going to watch central clips from each movie and going to explain the plot. And based on that, teach Jewish values. The dates there are also, it's around 9 classes. So we'll see how far we get, and I think we'll be able to learn a lot of Judaism. There's Judaism, this is a big thing actually in Sephardic culture, where Sephardim try to take out the good from all over the place. Sephardic cultures, at least. So we're going to try to take out the good from some of these movies and focus on the positive elements that I believe are pretty Jewish. Okay, so maybe if anybody has any questions at this point, you feel free to maybe put them into the chat section. I'll address them. If not, we'll just keep going. Okay. All right, without further ado, oops, sorry, I'm getting used to this program. Okay, so again, here's our general structure, and we're going to now head into Sephardic Jewry. All right, here are some pictures of some Sephardic rabbis. I wonder if anybody knows who this rabbi is. Anybody know who that is? Let me see if I can see. I'm just looking at your pictures. Okay, so anybody know who the rabbi on the right is? Raise your hand. Okay, that's the Rebbe. Okay, now the Rebbe on the left, the rabbi on the left, is another Rebbe. It's Rav Kaduri. Okay, Rav Kaduri was considered one of the big mystics of the generation. He passed away no one knows. I don't know. People don't even know how old he was, but over the age of 100. So you all are young compared to him. So he was like somewhat of a miracle worker. So we're gonna talk about him a little bit. But here's the main rabbi we're gonna focus on. Not the one on the right, the one on the left. This is Rav Ovadia Yosef. Okay. So on a personal note, this is actually my grandfather's Rebbe. Okay, so my grandfather, Yeshayahu Babayov, from my father's side, they were Persian, and he sat at Rav Ovadia Yosef's feet and learned Torah with him for years. And when he had a question, he'd ask Rav Ovadia Yosef. He is considered the central authority for Sephardim and he was also a political figure. Got himself in some trouble also in politics. So we'll talk about that. But so we have like a personal connection to him. And the chief rabbi of Israel, the current chief rabbi of Israel, there's a Sephardic one, there's an Ashkenazic one. The Sephardic one is Rav Avad Yosef's son, Rav Yitzchak Yosef. And the Ashkenazic one actually is also a son of a former chief rabbi. So there's just two rabbis. Now, what we're going to deal with is we're going to talk about 5 different topics, okay? And this is over 3 classes, so wish me luck. All right, the first topic is Sephardim and Mizrachim. Okay, so there's like a little bit of a confusion. Who is Sephardic? And what does Sephardic mean? And who's defined as Sephardic? So we're going to talk about that. Spirituality, which I'm really excited to talk to you about. I hope we can maybe get to that a little bit today. That's the source sheet I handed out to you, okay? I sent to you. And then we're going to talk about culture, which is some really fun things too. Food, synagogue, what the prayer books look like, chamsas, that kind of thing. Halacha and customs, and then Rav Avad Yosef. All right, so this is important. Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews. So Mizrahi Jews, they're a little bit different. So let's talk about Mizrahi Jews for a moment. Let's take a look at this. If you take a look at this map, you'll see that the red is Sephardic. Sephardic means people who are from Sfarad. Sfarad is Spain. Okay, so not every person who's from an Islamic country, from a Muslim country, is Sephardi. They're oftentimes defined as Mizrahi, and that's what this map is depicting. That there are Jews who are in Muslim lands who have been there from before the Spanish Jews were exiled into their land. I'm just checking out some sent to chat. Okay, sorry. So if you take a look, so we're going to go into how did the Jews become from Muslim lands end up becoming called Sephardic, and is that an accurate title for them? But if you just pay attention in the green, you'll see different lands that are to the east of Israel, and that's why those Jews are called Mizrahi Jews. If anyone knows Hebrew, Mizrach means east. Okay, so the east of Israel, or the east of the map, so they're called Mizrahi Jews. So not all Jews who are from Middle Eastern lands are really Sephardic. So how did they end up becoming called Sephardic? And how did the Jews end up leaving Spain? And when did they arrive in Spain? That's kind of like what we're going to talk about here. So if you look at that's kind of like our structure here: Mizrahi Jews, Sephardic Jews, Sephardim, Mizrachim, and Israel today. So if you pay attention here, this map kind of got cut off because of this like format of this presentation. But pay attention to the left here, Spain, and there was a certain Spanish expulsion, which some of you are probably familiar with, and those Jews disseminated and spread out to different lands. So those are the prototype Sephardic Jews, because they are from Sfarad, which is Spain. And these Jews brought with them this amazing culture to everywhere that they went. And if anybody knows, some of our central rabbis, we'll talk about that in a moment, were from Spain. I'm wondering if anybody knows any rabbis who are from Spain. Some of our Sephardic rabbis. Could you, if you can put them in the chat section. Okay, you're having trouble printing it. Okay. Sorry, one second. Let me just get back in my presentation here. Okay. I mean, you probably can't see it yet, but it'll be up in a moment. All right. So here, let's talk about Mizrahi Jews for a moment. Okay, so who are Mizrahi Jews? This is from Encyclopedia Britannica. They're called Bnei Mizrach or Edot HaMizrach. Okay, they lived for centuries in North Africa and Middle East, and whose ancestors did not reside in either Germany or Spain. So Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, Yemen, Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq. So there's a lot of countries here. Okay, so Jews come from those lands are considered Edot HaMizrach. Those are from the Mizrach. So I'm reading the bottom of the page, bottom of the source. Following the establishment state of Israel, all the Yemenite, Iraqi, and Libyan Jews and major parts of the other Mizrahi Jews communities migrated to Israel. So Jews have been in Muslim lands for years. Going back, I did a little research on, for instance, Persian Jews. Okay, Persian Jews did not arrive there upon, at least some of them did, but upon the expulsion of Jews from Spain in 1492, they did not just arrive there then. They were there much earlier. If anybody remember the story of Purim coming up, that took place in Persia. Okay, there were Jews in Persia and Iran many years, already since the expulsion, the Babylon exile. So these Jews have been in these lands for many years with their own customs. But what's unique to Sephardic or Mizrahi Jews compared, for instance, to Ethiopian Jews, is that they always had a lifeline to other mainstream Jewish circles. Ethiopian Jews are unique in that way. Even Yemenite, they had a connection. Ethiopian Jews, they a lot of their customs are what Jews did already back in the Second Temple, because they didn't update them as much since that time, because they didn't always get the Shulchan Aruch from those other Shulchan Aruch was central halachic texts from Israel, from the other communities. So it's what was really interesting when Ethiopians started coming to Israel. They had all these customs, and Jews in Israel said, "You're not really Jewish. What are you doing? You're doing stuff that we don't do." And the Ethiopian says, "You're not really Jewish. We're doing things the way that they used to do it thousands of years ago. You changed it." So Sephardic Jews, however, they were always kept staying updated and in line with Jews in Eretz Yisrael and other communities. So even though they were in far-off lands, they stayed connected. But so it's interesting to think about how different communities updated tradition and what that means. So that's when it comes to like their origins and the Mizrahi Jews themselves. There's many of these countries are affiliated with Mizrahi, the category Mizrahi, and they're there for many years. Now, who are Sephardic Jews? This is just a picture of like a Sephardic synagogue, a Spanish synagogue. Who are Sephardic Jews? So Sephardic Jews are Jews who are in one of those countries, not non-Ashkenazic countries, in Spain. And the question is, how did they get there? So there's like a lot of research on this. Some like to bring already the book of Ovadia, chapter 1. I'm saying chapter 1, but there actually is only one chapter in that book. So verse 20. And this exiled host of the children of Israel who are with the Canaanites as far as Zarephath and exiled Jerusalem, which is in Sfarad. So Ovadia talks about Sfarad. Now the question is it talking about Spain, whose name is Sfarad, or is it just some other place called Sfarad? So it's not clear. The earliest source that we can have that can clearly tell us that Jews were in Spain is from the early 3rd century, and it was this inscription on a gravestone. This is from Henry Abramson's. I took this from his slideshow on this. He gave a course on Sephardic Jewry, and here it says, "Here lies Nia, I think it's Nia, daughter of Solomon, aged 1 year, 4 months, and a day, a Jewess." So this appeared there. So at least we know there was one young girl in Spain who is Jewish. I'm sure there were more. So that's already from the beginning of the 3rd century. So Jews have been in Spain for a long time. Now, what makes Spanish Jewry so important is that they had this golden age of Judaism there. This is a picture of Ramban. I don't know if it really is or not, but it's a picture that I found on Google for Ramban. It's not his profile pic from Facebook. It's from a long time, much longer before. And here's a picture of Rabbi Yehuda Levi, which I don't know if that's what he looked like either, but it's a statue of his. Anyway, if anybody has heard these names, Rabbi Yehuda Levi, Rambam, Ibn Ezra, Ramban, Shmuel Nagid. There's so many names, and Judaism flourished in Spain already from 711 when there was the Muslim conquest of the Iberian Peninsula, and then it ended up allowing space for Jews, a certain autonomy for Jews. Some scholars say it's because they were nice to the Jews. Other scholars say that they didn't have time to persecute the Jews because it was like the Christians and the Muslims were like fighting with each other, and the Jews were able just to have their space to do their thing. But Jews in those countries, that was like the center of Judaism all the way until like 15th century, when Jews were expelled from Spain. But they put out poetry. They were involved in astronomy. They were physicians. They were involved in higher culture, and they wrote Jewish poetry, Jewish philosophy. Maimonides wrote his books, Ramban, Rabbi Yehuda Levi, the Kuzari. All these texts came out of Spain, and that's where you wanted to be. You wanted to be. Those are like the celebrities at the time. I heard in a lecture someone say, like, today the celebrities are Hollywood stars. He said in that time it was the poets. People went to like poetry slams. Like there's like these hip hop rap battles. At that time there was like poetry battles where people bring their poetry. So you could find all that wealth of knowledge in Spain. So Spain was the center of Judaism, and that's why it was such a devastating when that whole segment of Jewry had to relocate in 1492. So in 1492 there was the Alhambra decree. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. But what happened was there was an edict that was issued against the Jews of Spain, Ferdinand and Isabella. It ordered all Jews of whatever age to leave the kingdom, and either they had a choice to either convert or leave or be killed, but they couldn't stay Jewish. And it was really devastating. Many Jews converted. I have like some numbers on this. Around 300,000 converted to Catholicism. 40,000 to 80,000 Jews were forced into exile. And so it was really devastating. Imagine, like, I was like, they really built up a rich Judaism. And here's a Barbanel, where he described the experience at the time. Barbanel was a really interesting figure. If you've ever heard his name before, he was an important Sephardic commentator on the I'm forgetting the word. It's like a nice word on the Bible, and he was also a top politician. I think he might have been a physician too. I don't remember, but he was like in all like the inner circles of the government there, and so these are his description of the exile at that time. It's almost like the language here almost reminds you of the keynotes from Tisha B'Av. He says, "This was the exile of Jerusalem, which was in Spain, where the people had dwelled in the land of their sojourning on and resting in their place. From the rising of the sun to its setting, from north to south, there was never such a chosen people as the Jews of Spain in beauty and pleasantness, and afterwards there will never be another such people. God was with them. The children of Judea and Jerusalem, many and strong, they were quiet and trusting people filled with the blessing of God, with no end to its treasures, a pure and upright people, revering the Lord. I am the man, Ani Aish." You take this from Eicha. I am the man who saw his people in its glory and its beauty and its pleasantness. So there's another piece here, but basically this is another piece here where he laments the fall of the Jews. But you get the basic idea. So they were dispersed from Spain, and that's where this next stage comes in, where the Sephardim meet the Mizrachim. Okay, so here, I'm not going to go into these sources here, but I will just say that here's like another picture of Ovadia Yosef and his son, Yitzhak Yosef. But I'll just say that when Sephardim came to Mizrahi lands, like imagine today, I don't know, like you have people who are in, I guess we'll call first world countries, will go to like another country, and the education systems aren't advanced, and people don't know as much about scientific progress, and they come there and they'll try to educate them and inform them and upgrade them to all these new experiences and understandings. So that's kind of what some of the Sephardic Jews tried to do as they were expelled from their lands, and they headed into non-Ashkenazic lands, like Islamic, Muslim land, Eastern lands. So a lot of times they were able to influence those people there. And at a certain point, the prayer services of the Sephardim were accepted among a lot of the Mizrachim, those in the East. And so because of that fact, and because of another fact, which is that after the Rav Yosef Karo wrote his Shulchan Aruch, he was considered a Sephardic Jew, or from Sephardic, I believe from Sephardic, like from those locations, or his family was at least. I don't have to look into that, but he's considered a Sephardic Jew. So the Sephardi accepted his halacha, and then anybody who accepted his halacha became considered Sephardic because they accepted Sephardic halacha. So that's how the Sephardic title was offered to, was kind of like tagged onto Mizrachim, those from Eastern lands. But it's not always the case that they identify as that. So here's just reasons many Jews from Islamic lands are called Sephardic. They accept the Sephardic form of prayer, the Sephardic halachic authority, but many don't identify as Sephardim. Rav Ovadia, that's why I brought this picture here. Rav Ovadia Yosef tried to incorporate everybody under one big tent. But many of those Jews of like Iraqi, from Iraq or from Morocco or from other countries, they wanted to retain their original culture and the original title, and they didn't want to fall into this umbrella category. So it's not clear that, sorry, I'm going to go back to this, sorry. It's not clear that Jews, all Jews from Mizrahi lands are considered Sephardic. So it's still kind of like, if you go on searches on the internet, you'll find being defined as Sephardi or Mizrahi. Here's just some information on Israel today, Sephardi and Mizrachim. And here's one of the reasons why I wanted to teach this course as well. If you pay attention, it says the majority of Israeli Jews are Mizrahi. That's already something big. In America, the majority is not. But in Israel, the majority is Mizrahi. 61% of the Israeli population, with hundreds of thousands more having mixed Ashkenazi heritage due to cross-culture intermarriage. So they go into this a little bit, like who's defined as Sephardi and Mizrahi. If you go down to the last paragraph here, today over 2,500,000 Mizrahi Jews and Sephardi Jews live in Israel, with the majority of them being descendants of the 680,000 Jews who fled Arab countries due to expulsions and anti-Semitism, with smaller having immigrated from the Islamic republics of the former Soviet Union, India, Iran, Turkey. So here's just some numbers. And that's how the Sephardim ended up in Israel today and becoming actually the majority in Israel. It happened due to the fact that they suffered persecution in Islamic lands and they moved to Israel. So if you're in Israel, the majority of Israeli have some sort of affiliation with Mizrahi Jews. But if you look around, if you live in Israel, you'll see that it's not as bad as it used to be. But there is a lot of racism or ethnicism in relation to Sephardic Jews. How do I know this? Because my father told me. How does he know it? Because he experienced it when he was in Israel. And how is it still fresh in my mind? Because he's not going back there because he still feels like that when he goes to Israel. Okay, when he was younger and the Sephardim came from Sephardic countries and or Mizrahi, Eastern countries, we're going to talk about this, but the Enlightenment didn't really spread through those countries like it did in Ashkenazic countries. So a lot of those Jews were left not as educated as some of the Ashkenazic Jews. So when they came into the land of Israel, they assumed certain roles, which involved more labor and less education, a lot of them. And also they were kind of like placed in certain peripheral areas. So in Israel, Mizrachim and Sephardim, in the beginning of Israel, at least, there was a lot of racism towards them, a lot of looking down upon them. And to some extent, it's improved, but not all the way. I didn't really go through it because Israelis have because I wasn't completely identified among them as Sephardic because my mom's Ashkenaz. Also, in Israel, there's like an inferiority complex to Americans, towards Americans. So I don't know if that's good or not, but I benefited from that. So whenever you just speak English to Israelis, on one hand, they'll try to, they might think that they can take advantage of you. On the other hand, there's a certain respect there too. So to America. So I guess that helped me. But my father said when he went to Israel, even when he goes to Israel now, like he's on the bus or he's in a taxi cab, and sometimes a taxi cab driver will ask, like, "Where are you from?" And my father's like, I'm from Israel. And my father's like, why are you asking me where I'm from? I was in this car ride one time. He's like, would you ask somebody, like someone who's Ashkenazic, where they're from? And a lot of times that's true, actually. Like a lot of times Sephardim are like singled out, and they don't also in governmental positions. There haven't really been many Sephardic. There was one Sephardic, I believe, president. Maybe there was two, Katsav, and maybe there's one other. But in terms of like in the government, in the high up positions, you don't find many Sephardim. So it's something to think about. It's not like America. Well, America's not perfect either, but so that's kind of like the situation in Israel in terms of like it's still like an imbalance. Although the Sephardim, Mizrachim, to some extent, are the majority there, which is like just like ironic. So that's like we have like 5 minutes left, but I want to maybe just jump into just give you a little introduction to Sephardic spirituality, and then we'll bid each other farewell. Also, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat section. I see Gladys, you had trouble printing the files, so we'll tend to that. We'll get in touch with you. Try to tend to that. Okay, so let me just share my screen with you one more time. Okay, so a lot of the source sheet that I sent you, which we're not going to really get to, is based on Rabbi Mark Angel's two books, Sephardic Spirituality, and it's also a book called, let's give you the title once. Here are the books. This is The Rhythms of Jewish Living, and this one, which is Foundations of Sephardic Spirituality. These are pretty awesome books, and they have some really good points for us to reflect upon in terms of our lived Judaism today. And so here are some bullet points that kind of I put together based on his depiction of Sephardic spirituality, of the main highlights of Sephardic spirituality. There's this natural living, optimism, joy, aesthetics, proportion, balance, religious humanism, piety. So maybe I'll just talk for a quick moment, just about the natural living, and that'll be done. So we just finished the high holidays. Anne put in the comment, I always thought the Jews came to Spain with the Roman legions. I think Ferdinand's mother and grandmother originally was Jewish. Interesting. Yeah, so it's not, so you're saying that would go back to, so yeah, it could go back further than the 3rd century. I'm just saying we only have remnants that scientifically prove the Jews were there from the 3rd century. All right, so we just finished the high holidays, okay? Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. And in Sephardic communities, they start saying Slichot from the beginning of Elul, okay, 40 days straight. Now, if anybody's ever been, let me actually ask you. Raise your hand. Any of you ever been to Sephardic Slichot? Anybody? Raise your hand if you have. Okay. No one? Okay. So I have, and it's very different than Ashkenazic Slichot. Okay. I'm not saying one's better than the other, because I actually connect to both cultures in different ways. But what's unique about Sephardic Slichot, and this is prevalent in a lot of different other areas, is when they're involved in Slichot, it's like a celebration. When you go there, you're like, whoa, is Rosh Hashanah coming soon? Because basically they're singing, they're laughing, they're smiling, they're praising Hashem. That's how I experienced Sephardic culture, and that's what I liked about it. That's what drew me in. A lot of things are like a celebration of life. If you're ever in, like I mentioned, the food, if you ever go to a Sephardic event, there is a lot of food. There's a lot of, the aesthetic piece is always really played up. And it's kind of like a celebration and a deep happiness and connection and engagement in what they're doing in the moment. That's what I really like. It's never really too somber. It's upbeat and it's alive. And so we're going to see, that's just one example is the slichot, but there are many more examples of that. In his book here, we're going to talk about this. He combines Eastern spirituality versus Western spirituality. And he says and both of them are important and special. He says and this is not based on his analysis. Western spirituality a lot of times is very reflective. You picture yourself and you reflect on how you are experiencing a certain event. He says Eastern spirituality, which isn't just Sephardic Sephardim. It's Eastern spirituality in general. He says it's very it's very active and engaged and less reflective. And so it's very in the moment, very engaged. So if you ever think about like Eastern religions versus Western religions, that can stand out to you. If you know anything about like Eastern religions, Buddhism, or Eastern meditative practices, it's all about being engaged in the moment and involved in that. And so like, for instance, if you go to Sephardic synagogue, you'll sit there and there's a lot of communal singing and a lot of the senses are engaged. A lot of times they'll pass around like something for you to smell, make a blessing on. Oftentimes there's like pictures and lights, and it's about like kind of just like about like being involved in the moment and enjoying yourself with all your senses. And so that's like a fun, engaging, and happy experience. And that's some of the beauty of Sephardic. We're going to talk about that in our next class. We'll talk about Sephardic spirituality and the components of Sephardic spirituality. And we're also going to talk about different Sephardic cultural aspects. So kind of like how to mysticism in Sephardic life, the different rabbis, how people relate to the rabbis. When I was in Israel, I was kind of surprised by the fact that, like, in America, you go to a rabbi, you'll shake the rabbi's hand. And in some of the Sephardic communities in Israel, they kiss the rabbi's hand. So obviously that would definitely, it's probably going to be like stopped altogether from now on from Corona. But I also kind of found it nasty already back then, but that's another story. But they kiss the rabbi's hand, and then the rabbi will put the hand on the person's head and bless them. And so we're going to see how they view the rabbis, not just as sources of information, but as spiritual conduits, and a lot of other really interesting aspects. And so hopefully through this experience, you'll get to see new things and maybe come to adopt some new practices or ideas, or at least have a path to research going forward. All right, thanks for joining today. All right, everybody, have a beautiful day and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Take care.
Yes, thank you.
Yashiko.
Very nice.
Yoga.